Guys, all right, you guys already know we are back in building series. Okay, it's NGS everything. We're going to talk about turbos, baby. We're going to talk about turbos today, talk about air intake systems, talk about how it all works, what we're going to be doing, and how I got my stuff out and put it back in. So this is not only going to be an explanation video, it's going to be a video that shows you how to put it in, take it out, how it works, and just overall some things you might want to keep in mind when you're doing this kind of stuff. Now remember, I am not an expert pro mechanic. I am an amateur mechanic, but I do know a thing or two, and I do know how to turn a wrench, and this is going to be a learning experience for me as well as you guys, because I have never done a turbo myself before. It's my first time ever messing with one, so this should be pretty interesting. Let's get into it. Okay, so what we have here is a stock Kia Optima SX turbo. Right now the lighting isn't too great, so I apologize for that, but this is the turbo with the exhaust manifold still attached. Right now, when you buy this turbo stock, you have an option to either buy just the silver part, which is the physical turbo itself, or you can buy the exhaust manifold with it. I chose to do the exhaust manifold with it so I could just simply have a whole new setup, right? What we also have here over to the left is a down pipe. So this is the pipe that connects to this part of the turbo. You can see it has the same pattern right there, and then gets fed down into the exhaust. And the reason why this is aftermarket is because of this. Now, I'm not too familiar with this basically, but it's like some kind of flex pipe, and it has less restriction and more flow, so that the turbo has less back pressure on it, and things can flow better. It also has an O2 sensor on it right here. So that is pretty cool. And then over here to the left, we have a K&N air filter. Now, let's start with how all this works and what all of this has in common. And then we'll show you guys the car here in a minute. So let's start with intake. So when you first start a car, in order for an engine to run in general, you need three components. You need fuel, you need air, and you need spark. Right? Or just energy or fire, just something to simply ignite the mixtures of fuel and air, correct? Now, what this whole system is about is air. The spark portion of this of an engine system, and the fuel engine portion of an engine system, we will talk about in a different video. This will be solely about the air intake and the turbos, how turbos work, and this particular turbo in general. And we'll also talk a little bit about piping. But so to get the basics on how a intake system works, okay, or better known as a cold air intake. So basically, air enters the car through a filter. Now this is an aftermarket K&N filter, and it is very dirty. I actually did clean it, believe it or not. This is a thrashed one, and it may have to be cleaned multiple times for it to get its kind of usefulness back, because as of right now it's very dirty, but I also contemplated buying a new one. Air enters into the engine through a filter. Now the filter helps keeps impurities like dust and various other variety of things out of the air that is entering the motor, to help keep it clean and pure. So it's important to have a filter you need a filter in order for the car to physically run properly. If you don't have a filter, then all kinds of crap could get into the engine. It can cause damage. So filters are important. Once air travels in through the filter, it then travels through a series of tubes and then enters into the car. Now, a normal car, it'll just go straight into the intake manifold. The intake manifold is the exact opposite of the exhaust manifold. The intake manifold basically has a bunch of either cast iron or aluminum or whatever your car manufacturer decide to put on there pipes that will lead directly into the 4 cylinders, or 6 or 8 or 12 or however many you have. And then from there, it gets mixed with fuel, air, and spark, and then boom, causes an explosion. The piston goes up and down, the valves open, releasing the carbon dioxide or exhaust out into the exhaust manifold, and then straight out the downpipe to the tip of the exhaust tip in the rear of the car, thus exiting a car. So that is basically the life cycle of air going through your vehicle, right? In a normal vehicle. However, this is a turbo. And what a turbo does is it basically does that process, but it accelerates, it makes it faster. Now, everything's run under compression, and it has pressure. It basically, the engine's an airtight, compressed chamber, right? So it's almost like a sort of a vacuum effect, right? The only air that it has comes from the intake, right? So as air comes in, it creates a vacuum, and that helps move the piston up and down, right? It creates vacuum pressure, and it pushes the piston up and down with the explosion. There's a lot going into it, and we'll get into a much more detailed explanation. And that may have not made a whole lot of sense, but I promise it will in a minute. But basically what I'm getting at is that the pressure inside a motor, right, is basically there's a certain amount of pressure each motor generates, right? What this does is it increases the amount of air that's being forced into the engine, which ultimately basically makes the engine run faster. It makes more air pressure created inside the piston, which allows it to accelerate up and down faster. It allows for more concentrated or condensed air to enter the piston chamber, which then also explodes more violently, which also then increases acceleration. And then also having an aftermarket downpipe that has less restrictions, so that basically means there's less things for the air to get hung up on its way out of the pipe. To support that air coming in also supports the air flowing out. Now, obviously, you guys probably already know some problems, right? Well, if air's coming in like crazy and it can't come out crazy, that creates back pressure. And that pressure can basically build up in the turbo and cause issues. So if you are upgrading a car with no turbo to a turbo, you usually want to upgrade your downpipe or even do a cat delete, because what's going to happen is, or you can buy a aftermarket part that has a cat specified for a turbo, so that you don't need to delete the cat if you don't want to do that. But if most of us just do a straight pipe because it's simpler and it's cheaper and it sounds better. But if you don't do that, it causes issues. So when you upgrade a system, right, from a basic stock system to a turbo system, you also got to upgrade this, because it also is very important that all that added pressure gets sent out nice and smooth with no restriction. The more restriction you have, the harder the turbo is going to have to work, and that pressure, there's already so much pressure going on in the turbo, so that can cause major issues. So it's always important that you don't just slap a turbo on and start growing. You're going to want to upgrade your pipe system. But if you upgrade your pipe system or this on a standard car that doesn't have any of this, obviously this is going to be sucking a lot more air, right? It doesn't suck the normal amount of air a normal engine would need. It sucks like double or triple or even quadruple the amount, right? That's why you need an aftermarket air filter, or at least a higher performance flowing air filter. It doesn't necessarily have to even be aftermarket. I'm pretty sure they might even have OEM options. I'm not even 100% sure about that. But aftermarket or K&N or Spectre or whatever you go with is what is recommended, because these allow for much more airflow to go through them, unlike a standard filter. And you sacrifice the need to filter so much air out in order to have much higher flow. So it still filters air, but not as much as a stock one, but it's only because it's trying to get more air through the filter itself. That's what the filter looks like. On the inside, it's hollow. It kind of just looks like basically just, it's just a bunch of thin wire mesh. You can see it kind of right there. So it can definitely breathe a lot more than a regular filter, which is normally cotton, which this actually might still be cotton, but it's just arranged in a way that allows air to go through it more freely. So with a turbo system, I'm pretty sure it's self-explanatory. You can't just do one thing or the other. If you're going to do this, you got to do it all. Now, for people who actually already have a turbo installed in their car, like I do, my Kia Optima came with one stock, then you should already have all this. So no problems, right? Well, it's much easier to upgrade a turbo in a car that already has support for a turbo than a car that has no support for a turbo, because most of the work's already done for you. There might be a couple things you might want to change out, like maybe a better downpipe or maybe a even better air filter. But overall, having a car that already has a turbo makes this whole process so much easier, because the car can already handle the stress of a turbo to begin with. Most car engines can't handle the stress of it because it's only designed, or I should say engineered, to handle a certain amount of air, fuel, and spark. This basically forces more fuel, more air, and it even requires more spark. That's why you need special spark plugs sometimes. Sometimes you even need more aftermarket fuel injectors. It's a big deal, but the result is you got much faster acceleration, some noises, and a hell of a good time. So it's honestly worth it, but it is a little pricey. If you already have a car that has it built into it, most cars that have turbos compared to standard models are going to be a good couple grand more. And obviously, if you want to upgrade them, turbos can be anywhere in the neighborhood of $3 to $4 grand. And if you really want to get crazy, you might even see something, upwards north of, I don't know, maybe 6. So they're not cheap. But if you have one already and you just want to replace it like mine, because my turbo went out, it can be as low as $600 to $500. For example, this one, the whole thing is going to cost me, the whole replacement for this is going to cost me just a little shy of $600. So this is definitely a cheaper option. And obviously, I'm getting the same exact turbo, so it's not going to be much of a difference when it comes to power and performance. But it's still cheaper to do this than buy a whole brand new turbo. So that's the cool thing. Even if you wanted to upgrade a little bit and just get an overall just a bigger chamber and a bigger propeller and with more fins and yada yada yada, you wouldn't have to change too much. Like I said, the car's already basically meant to handle it. The biggest thing I think you'd really have to do if you got a bigger turbo is simply get maybe a better flowing exhaust, because the K and air filter is probably about as good as you're going to get. Now, all that aside, basically what a turbo does, and this is a more detailed explanation, is once the air goes through the filter and it comes into this chamber, so it enters right here. As you can see, you may not be able to see because the lighting's horrible, there's a propeller in here. I don't know if you can guys hear it. See, that propeller is really loose. So I'm going to talk about that in a second, but that propeller is not supposed to be loose. It's supposed to be nice and snug and tight, but it's not. It's loose. But anyways, and there's the part number if you guys are curious about the one I have. I will also put that in the description so you guys have an idea of what I'm working with. I don't know what type this is. I don't know how much boost it produces. I'm not that well versed in turbos. I just understand the basics of how they work. So air comes into this hole right here, which would be coming from this, and then it gets spooled up by a turbine. The turbine not only sucks air in there, but it condenses it, and it basically compresses it and then shoots it out this top. Now, I'll show you guys in the car portion here in a minute, but basically the air that comes out of the top here gets sent into something called an intercooler. And the intercooler sits somewhere by your radiator towards the front of your car because it needs air to blow through the fins. Now, the intercooler condenses it even more, and condensed air it basically ignites and it basically does what air would normally do in an engine, but just does it much better and faster also. And condensed air packs a lot more of a punch too compared to regular air. So once it gets condensed through the condenser, which how a condenser condenses air, that's a great question. We'll have to do some research on that. But all I know is it does. Once it's done doing that, it will come back out the condenser, and then it will enter the motor through the intake manifold, which I will show you in the car later, and I'll show you all the pipes and all that stuff too. Once it enters in, it blows up and compresses. It blows up and creates, and it turns into exhaust gases. From there, it now enters through here the exhaust manifold, and then goes into the second part of the turbo. Now, obviously, this whole thing is technically one giant turbo, right? There's a propeller in here and a propeller in here. And basically how it works is both propellers, one helps air get in and one helps push air out, because now all this air is being crammed into this chamber. So now this one has to force it out as fast as this one's forcing it in. So basically that way it flows nice and good and all that stuff. If you didn't have this second part, there wouldn't be anything helping all this extra exhaust that's being created from all this added air out, and it could effectively cause some issues, especially if you have some Ford or Cat, because it's a lot more exhaust for it to burn, and if it's moving slowly and not moving fast enough, it could probably cause some issues like dirty up O2 sensors and stuff like that. But that's why you have to have one on the intake side and the exhaust side. And that's typically why when you have a turbo, it's mounted somewhere near the exhaust manifold, because it needs to be able to help force the exhaust gases out as well as bringing cold air in. Hope that wasn't too confusing. Again, there's a lot more turbos than that, but that is basically the rundown. Now, hopefully that kind of explains what a turbo does and how it works. I'll show it more in the car itself, and I'll also explain more when I get it all put back together, so I can show you guys a physical live driving action of the vehicle. I could even draw a presentation too. We can go more in depth with it so it's easier to explain, but that's just kind of a rough overview. Now let's talk about our turbo. So our turbo, as you can see, has this cool little, I don't know what you'd call this. I'm not quite sure what you call this bit, but this shaft here, right, opens a valve, and I'll go ahead and actually flip my turbo around. Let me go ahead, lift my turbo up, and let's stick this in here so it doesn't leak oil everywhere, because there's some oil still left in the turbo. Let's go ahead and lift this up on its side so I can show you guys this. So this is the part where the exhaust, this is the part where, oops, sorry. Ooh. And you know what? There's probably, we'll probably find out when the new one comes in, but I think there's supposed to be a propeller right there. And there's nothing. That's interesting. I'll have to get back to you on that one. I'm pretty sure there's supposed to be something in there, but there isn't. Kind of funny. Anyways, moving on. So what we have here, right, is a valve. So I can move this manually, kind of. I'm going to try to anyways. And what this does is it opens this up. Now, if you look at the construction of this, it's a 4-to-1 exhaust tube. So it goes to 4 holes into one, and it converges into here, right? Now, I'm not 100% sure exactly like when this triggers or how that works. That's still a little bit beyond me, but all I know is air gets released through here, and this mechanism right here, which is attached to an electric component on the car, so there's like a sensor attached to it, opens and releases this valve, which then releases exhaust gases into here, which then the spool here spins up and then sends out its way. So actually what probably happens, and again, I'm still learning this whole process myself, but I'm assuming either it comes out of here and into here, or it goes this way. I'm not quite sure how it travels, but basically this part mounts to here, if it wasn't obvious based by the pattern, and then the exhaust is then travel down this pipe and out the back of the car. Now, this, again, I'll do more research, but this is basically, it's important you have one of these. It basically controls flow through the manifold. I'm not quite sure, again, like the pattern of how it goes through. And again, I'm not quite sure what's going on here. But then, so that's kind of the downpipe connection piece, so you can kind of see what that looks like on the inside. Now let's go ahead and let's show you guys the exhaust manifold side. So this is my exhaust manifold side. Now, if you have these lines, that is completely normal. That is just how it was designed, so don't freak out when you see that. So as you see, there are 4 holes here for each cylinder. And every time the combustion sequence ends, it sends exhaust down this hole, and then it converges into one here, and then gets mixed up here inside this turbine, and then comes out here. So that part is done. Finally, you have the actual condensed air outlet. So this is where all the air comes out when it's condensed. It comes in through there where the rag is, and it gets condensed up and it gets shot out here. And this is from here, it goes to the intercooler. And that is basically a quick rundown of how my turbo works. Pretty simple and straightforward. And then the O2 sensor right here is obviously attached to the downpipe. Now, you're probably wondering why I have the downpipe off and this off and this off. Well, it's a long story. I've never taken apart one of these before, and I thought it had to come all out. Turns out I was wrong, and this was not necessary. So now that we're done with explanation of my turbo, the components I have laid out here and how they work and what they do, now let's actually physically talk about them. Why are they on my table? Well, as you guys may have noticed from me just wiggling it around, my propeller is fucked up. Now, to talk about what I was mentioning earlier, your propeller is not supposed to do this. And I know it's really hard to see because my camera doesn't want to show you guys what it looks like in there. Maybe you'll be able to see it here if I stick my phone. You can kind of see the you can kind of see in there. Okay, yeah, that's really close. You might not be able to see very well, but overall, I mean, so you can kind of see it in there. There's basically a bunch of fins in there. It acts like a giant, like, wind propeller, like a fan, and that's what helps suck the air in and push it out. It is currently loose and wiggling around. That means that the bearing is shot and it broke. And also, when I first took it apart, there was a hell of a ton of oil just chilling in there. So not only that, it was spraying oil everywhere. So the whole thing's toast. Now, technically, the only part I would have to replace is this. But like I said, I didn't know that at first, so I ordered the whole thing. Oh well. But because this might be missing a piece that I just now noticed, it's probably a good thing that I did the whole thing anyway, so it doesn't matter. And then other than this mechanism here that helps open this valve that is electronically controlled by the car, that's all there is to this. Now let's get to this more. So the downpipe itself is pretty straightforward. And yep, I was right. Okay, well, we'll get back to that. We'll get back to that. I'm sorry. That was funny as hell. I love how I'm sitting here like, I think there's supposed to be something there. I turned my fucking intake upside down, and then boop, here comes out the fucking piece I was looking for. I think I know why it's not working. Damn. All right. We'll look at that here in a second because that's interesting. But anyway, so the downpipe. So as you can see, the downpipe, let me turn some light on here. There we go. So you can see the downpipe here consists of cast iron. And then you have a point where you can disconnect it here or here. The O2 sensor connects into the elbow. And then it goes down straight to another elbow and turns to this flex stuff. Now, I don't know what this is technically called, but this is supposedly aftermarket because I did some research and I found out this is not actually stock. And then this part that sticks off here it basically just goes to there's like a little rubber like gasket that helps hold the actual physical exhaust manifold up and support it underneath the car. And then these are the 2 bolts that obviously mount it to the rest of the exhaust. And that is the inside. Well, now that we have some light, we'll actually shine that in there so you can see. Pretty dirty. And then actually, now that we have some light here, we can show you what that looks like. So that's what it looks like in there. Kind of cool. And then this is what it looks like now. Okay, so now you can see the physical propeller. I'm going to show you right here. That is like garbo. Like, that's like really bad. And it may have something to do with the fact that this piece is supposed to be directly connected to that guy. So this is the piece that's missing. Obviously you can see it completely sheared off. And even the, yeah, look at that. Whew. That thing got fucked up. This is like bad. So this must have flung off like a freaking frisbee and flew down my exhaust and got caught in the 90. Oh, that is crazy. Yeah, so this is supposed to go in here like that, and it fell out. So that's interesting. Well, we're replacing it anyways, so it doesn't really matter too much, but so there's that mystery solved. So now let's actually look down our exhaust pipe here and let's see if we can see. So I don't see any scratch marks. You can see right there, that's where the O2 sensor came in. So I don't see any like the scratch marks, or maybe right there, maybe that's some scratch marks. But wow, from how much damage that took from coming out, you would think that we would notice some gouges along the side or some scratches, but it doesn't have anything, so it's interesting. All right, anyways, so that's enough for the down pipe, and that's enough talk about that. Let's go over a quick view of the K&N. So now that I have some actual proper light here, I'm going to show you guys the inside of this. So that's what it looks like. You got all these like, it almost looks like haystack, like hay, like thread or something in there. Then you got that part, and then these are really nice filters to have. I recommend them. They come with these nice little hose clamps to help mount them on. And yeah, so that's my turbo setup. Let me show you what it came out of and what we're gonna have to do to finish fixing it. But that is the of the first episode. That was just a rundown what I have. What we're gonna be doing is replacing the stock with a new one, show you guys the difference, show you guys how to put it back in, and then I'll show you guys what it's supposed to sound like when it's running. And we'll go through the whole process together. In the next video, I'm going to show you guys the actual car portion, show you guys the intercooler, the pipes, and I'm going to show you where the turbo was and all the different things that connect to it. And an interesting part about the antifreeze that is also involved in the system, something that I didn't know about. So stay tuned, guys, for part 2 of this video, where we're going to talk more in depth about the different parts that we took out, how we took them out. And then in the next video, when we get the actual part this weekend, I will show you guys me physically installing it, putting things back together, and test starting the car. And we'll talk more about the other things we plan on doing to the car. But thank you guys for watching. That was just a little rundown on turbos, my turbo in general, and just overall how the whole system works and why it's important you want to upgrade your whole system versus just not upgrading it at all. I'm talking to you fucking Mazda guys out there. I know you guys do it. You ain't fucking guilty. Don't fucking hide it. Anyways, guys, that is it. That's the end of this video. It's kind of a short one, but just kind of wanted to do a quick rundown. Hadn't had a video out for a while, so go to part 2 of the series so we can get more in depth on the car. So I'll see you guys there. Stay tuned.